Hello, and welcome to the Rossaround Backstage Podcast, talking with artists, technicians, musicians, producers, directors, and all the interesting and talented people that make it all happen for you. Hi, everybody. This is Ross Pallone with the Rossaround Backstage Podcast. I'm here today at the historic Capitol Records building in Hollywood, California. I will be talking with 7-time Grammy Nominee, composer, arranger, and trumpet player Chris Walden. My first question for you, Chris, is how did you get into this business?
Well, thank you for having me on your podcast, Ross. It's an honor. My musical journey started when I was really young. I come from a musician's family. My mother is a classical choir singer, specialized in ancient, I would say, early Baroque and Renaissance music, and performed on historic instruments. As early as I can remember, I think I was 4 or 5 years old, I remember musicians coming to our house with all kinds of instruments, especially historic instruments like Baroque trombones and dulcimers and all these kinds of things. And I was fascinated as a 4-year-old with these instruments. And these musicians that would come to our house let me try these instruments. So that kind of started a early curiosity, not only about music but also instruments. And I think I started, my parents also got me music teachers and got me started in learning to play the recorder. And I think I could learn, I was able to read and write music before I was even able to write letters in a book or so.
Wow.
So music notation is something that I learned from very early on. So then I started playing recorder, and then I got piano lessons at age 6, and then trumpet lessons at age 12 or 13, I think. And then I got into jazz music because as I said, my mom is a classical singer, and that was kind of my getting interested in jazz was my way of rebellion against the parents.
Right.
Not that my mother didn't have anything against jazz, but it was an area where my mother knew nothing about. And she was happy with me exploring jazz, but it was a field of music that I could own to myself, that my mom could not tell me anything about how to do it and how to perform it.
And what instrument were you playing at that young age? Okay.
But I think it was good to start out on piano, because to this day when I write music, obviously knowing how to play piano is a good tool to have when writing music, for the understanding of harmonic and that sort of stuff.
Now, when you started playing trumpet, then did you, at that early age, were other kids in your classes and stuff into jazz, and you guys could put together a band or anything?
Not really. Sort of. By that time, I was sort of in middle school, and by that time, it was the mid '70s, and I think jazz was never as unpopular as in the '70s.
Right.
So that was the height of the disco era. So I was sort of like the outcast or the nerd that was into jazz. I would listen to Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, and nobody in school would get that. Mm-hmm. Then later in high school, I started playing in the high school big band, and there I would connect with other kids that also were into jazz, and that also started my interest in writing music, because we had a lovely teacher who would lead that high school band, and he would kind of provide arrangements that he did themselves, but they weren't really good. And he knew about this. And at some point I complained about, I think it was 15, 16 years old, I complained about it. And then he said, well, if you think you can do it better, just be my guest. And so I did. And I started doing takedowns of Count Basie charts, because at that time we didn't have access to stock arrangements that you could buy like these days. So I would just, from a record, I would do a takedown of a Count Basie arrangement, and that's how I got started in arranging. And then we played those, and my teacher encouraged me to do more of this, because he said, yeah, your arrangements are better than mine, keep on doing what you're doing.
Wow. So you had to sit there with the needle and drop it and listen for,
Yeah, well, I had a reel-to-reel machine, so I transferred.
So you were able to stop.
I transferred the vinyl to the reel-to-reel, and then I would start and stop the reel-to-reel, the tape machine, back and forth, and then note by note, instrument by instrument.
Wow, that must have taken a long time to do, right?
The first few took a long time, then I got better at it, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And taking down instrument by instrument what they were playing. And that, to me, to this day, where I tell my students or when people take lessons with me, is the best way to learn arranging, to do takedowns, to transcribe what you hear. It's even better than when you're looking at the score from someone else and see how they write. If you get even more behind the music of someone else if you transcribe it.
Now, at that early age,
yeah.
you probably hadn't had a chance to learn like all the instruments. Like I know arrangers need to know a lot about all the instruments.
Right, I was kind of learning by doing.
And you were just learning by doing, huh?
Yeah.
Because I would think that's, to me, that was always kind of amazing. Oh, well, on this instrument it's this note, and on this instrument it's another note.
And then again, this leads back to, or connects back to my very early days when I was 4 or 5 years old, trying out all these instruments that the musicians would bring to our house. So when I started writing for all these instruments, I developed, even though I can't play that instrument, but I developed a feel how to write for it because I at least had it in my hand once. And to this day, if I write an orchestral arrangements, every instrument in the orchestra at least had in my hand once. So I know, even though I don't play oboe, but I know sort of what it feels like to hold it in my hand, and that helps when you write for that instrument.
Yeah, wow. I think that's so amazing that people like you can do that. Thank God we have you.
Yeah,
because otherwise we wouldn't have all these great arrangements. It's wonderful.
And as a trumpet player, around the same time, I started working professionally when I was 16 years old. I got called to play in a wedding band, so I would go out on weekends and play casuals with the top 40 band, and making my own first money when at the age of 16.
That's great.
Yeah,
maybe some commercial type stuff, or mostly weddings and
parties and whatever was hip at the time. By then it was the early mid 80s. We would play whatever was in the hit in the top 40s at that time, and some including also on weddings, obviously, and some German polka or whatever what people would dance to.
So would you say that you, at that age, high school age, you had pretty much decided that you wanted to be a musician?
Absolutely. And I think by the time I was 16, it was clear that's going to be my path, my career path. Ever since, I haven't looked back.
Well, and being that your parents were into the music, so were they supportive? Or?
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because, a lot of guys, or women, that want to be a musician when they're in high school age, the parents are like, no, don't do that, so you had support.
No, they were not against it, but they were also not pushing it. They were just seeing how it develops, and okay, if he wants to go to music, okay, that's fine, then we'll support him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay.
But they would have been happy with any other choice too,
So then high school, then after high school, did you go?
Well, then in Germany, we had a draft at that time.
Oh, okay.
So I did my service, which at that time was actually 20 months, which is quite a long time, but I did music throughout. And even during my service, I was writing arrangements for the local radio big band, because at that time was a special situation in Germany. In the mid-'80s, every German major city had still its fully employed high school, a radio big band.
Oh.
Because of our public broadcast system, which is sort of similar to the UK, which was actually put in place by the Allies after the Second World War. And we owe it to the Americans in Germany that they made sure that public broadcast can never be hijacked by a government again for political propaganda, like it happened during the Third Reich, during the Nazi years. So the Allies, France, England, and America put this public broadcast system into place, which is sort of controlled by the government, but also has entities outside of the government that controls it. So it's an unbiased and even controlled radio system. And especially the Americans said, and we want every radio station to have its own big band. And that held through to almost the early 90s. So the town I grew up in, Hamburg, had its radio big band, and this is a fully professional, fully employed radio big band. They rehearse, record every day, and they need arrangements. And by the time I was 19, I became a staff arranger for that radio big band.
Wow. That's impressive. At that age, yeah.
And that, again, learning by doing. I was writing arrangements for them.
Wow, that's wild. And now, the military, they didn't have a military band that you could have gotten into, maybe?
Yeah, I did. I played in the military.
Oh, you did?
band. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That was part of my service, yeah.
That's cool. And so they had a big band, and did you have to do marching band kind of stuff
that's
too?
also part of it, yeah. But I then, since I didn't want to serve with a gun, there's an option in Germany. You can do a substitute service, which in my case, I was a paramedic.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know Germany had that mandatory draft.
Yeah, they just got away with it 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I know I have a friend who's a musician is from Israel, and they have mandatory.
Yeah.
Everybody has to go into the service for 2 years. Yeah, women. Yeah, right out of high school.
Yeah.
It's
similar in Germany.
It's pretty much almost everybody has to do it unless you have some disability or something.
Exactly the same thing in Germany, except there's the only man in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
So and then after high school, I mean after the service, I was already working a lot as a musician, writing arrangements, and still playing trumpet. And I had a stint with a circus for a couple of months. I went out with a circus, playing trumpet, and on a cruise ship, and all these kinds of things. I applied at the Music Conservatory in Cologne, where I majored in composing and minor conducting. But I was the only one in my composing class at the Music Conservatory who was already making a living writing music. And to this day, I have to say that most of what I know today about my craft and about writing music, I did not learn in school, in music school. I learned it by learning by doing, being presented with the challenge at the right time.
Sounds like you would have been way far advanced from the other students.
I sort of
in
was,
school.
yeah.
Because you already had a lot of experience in working as a professional.
Yeah. But the school time in music school was still a good time and was a great networking tool. I made friends for life, and also there we had a music school big band that I played in, and I could write for that band. It gave the opportunity to try out things, and so then I was handed from radio big band to radio big band all across Germany to write for all these radio big bands, and then which also led me then to. They handed me then off to the Radio Symphony Orchestra, so then I suddenly would write arrangements for symphony orchestras as well. I was living then in the city of Cologne, which was at that time in the late 80s the hub of music recording, similar to what LA was Cologne. There were a lot of recording studios, and I would write for recording sessions a lot for recording artists. And at one point I was writing arrangements for a singer-songwriter who got asked to write a film score for a feature film. And since he was just a singer-songwriter, he would write nice themes, but he had no clue how to apply this to the picture and how to arrange and orchestrate it. So he got me to arrange and orchestrate his themes to that film. And again, it was learning by doing. I figured out how not to write film scores. And it was a very chaotic project. But that film got a lot of attention and was a big success in Germany, and even got nominated for an Oscar for Best Foreign Language film here in Hollywood.
Oh.
And for the next film, the producers saw what I did on that film, as opposed to the singer-songwriter who hired me, that they hired me for the next film directly, which terminated my relationship with that singer-songwriter.
I guess so, yeah. You just snaked him out of a job, right?
Yeah. And that kind of started my film scoring career in Germany, and I think I was 23 by that time.
Wow.
So then I went off and did a lot of film scoring in Germany and television scoring, and I did like a weekly drama series for years, similar to ER here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, while I was still writing symphony orchestra arrangements for radio symphony orchestras. And by the time I was 29, I felt like I had accomplished in Germany